You have been on the show. It's been over 2 years. We've told your personal story. I think it's really interesting how you kind of got into this being a dietitian for as long as you had been, and then to actually be a little bit challenged. Can you tell us about how you discovered the low carbohydrate nutrition space?
Yeah, so it probably was about 10 years ago now, and I'm not sure of the exact words that I told the story, but I think there was probably some gaps that I left out. And I think one of the gaps I left out was I was brought onto a PhD supervision as as a skeptical mainstream dietitian. So Catherine Crofts, who's you might know of her, she's kind of she's New Zealand pharmacist, academic, but also expert in hyperinsulinemia, and she was doing her PhD supervised by Professor Grant Schofield and someone else. At the time, I can't remember, and they were looking at event sponsorship or management. It was like, oh my God, so boring. Anyway, she changed her topic and decided to come into this hyperinsulinemia space, and she managed to connect with Joseph Kraft, the late Joseph Kraft, and got his massive database on insulin assays. And so this whole area of insulin resistance and hyperinsulinemia was being talked about among them, and I was brought on as like, oh, let's bring Caryn on as the secondary supervisor for this for the supervision, because she's going to rebut everything we say about carbohydrates, because we think carbohydrates are not the way to go, and I'm going to come in and defend them. So that was a really interesting start, and it was a pretty bumpy ride in the beginning, because I think it's when you start seeing some information and hearing some information and talking about fundamental principles of pathophysiology in the body, like insulin resistance and how the body cannot tolerate carbohydrate if you're insulin resistant. Who is insulin resistant? Well, actually, most of the population. If you've got pre-diabetes, diabetes, you've got polycystic ovaries, ovarian syndrome, menopause. So like, hello, that's half our population will be moving towards or getting insulin resistant at some part of their lives, and a host of other conditions as well. So when you start understanding that most of the population cannot actually process, metabolize, store, handle their carbohydrates like a metabolically perfect person, the 5% of the population that are that, then you start to question, well, why are we shoveling carbohydrates down them? Like it's a really simple question. And I'm like, oh my God, why did I not question this going through my dietetic training, going through the first, 10 years of my academic career? Why did I not actually question this? And the reason why I didn't question it, so I'd never come across the terminology of insulin resistance or hyperinsulinemia. It wasn't a thing. I mean, it's always been a thing, but it just wasn't out there. And that really opened my eyes. And I just thought, you just can't go back to where you were once you sort of enlightened to this new way of thinking. The high fat thing was a big issue for me. The low carb was less so, but the high fat was a big issue, and that has morphed over the years. But that took a lot of reading and researching and deliberating about the whole saturated fat concept and all that kind of stuff. And then, of course, as a dietitian who really understands food composition, I realized that you can actually do LCHF, low carb, healthy fat, in a way that doesn't ruffle feathers or make your hair stand on end. So you don't have to pour cream, butter, cheese, bacon on absolutely everything you eat, but rather you can still go higher fat, but have more monos and polyunsaturated fats, and emphasize protein a little bit more. So that was my entry into it. I'm just sort of digressing a little bit, but what followed was really interesting. It was years of criticism from my dietetic colleagues. So I belong to the New Zealand Dietitians Board, and I have to every year get my practicing certificate and continuing competency and all that. So there were formal complaints, not by clients, they were doing really well, by colleagues who would see things that I'd say in the media or on TV productions and things, and they'd complain. Like I'd say something like, fat doesn't make you fat. Oh, that was just, had everyone up in arms, and I had all these complaints about it. And those sorts of things. I did some work with a school in a boarding school in Auckland. We analyzed the diet, and there was something like, I can't even remember how much sugar initially was in the diet, but we managed to remove like 40 teaspoons of sugar from the diet, and we did it in consultation with the chefs, with the school, with the parents, and with the kids. And
Wow.
BMI dropped, waist circumference dropped, health improved. Yet a dietitian wrote into the dietitians board and the Ministry of Education complaining that I am tampering with our children's diets, and I shouldn't be doing this because it's really dangerous for them. I mean, can you believe it? That's just horrendous. And then it kind of died down for a while. And I'll just finish. I know this is a bit long-winded, but I'll finish by saying that last year, so I was complaint-free for years, and I thought, oh, finally, it's all gone away. It's brilliant. And then last year, a dietitian who is studying a PhD, I won't mention anything more than that, they put a complaint in about me and something that the medical students were shown that I was in, and it was all about low carb diets for type 2 diabetes in our Maori and Pacific Island populations. And they were complaining that the medical students are being taught this stuff about low carb, and we know very well that there's no evidence to suggest that low carb diets and type 2 diabetes is actually a thing. I'm like, oh my God, you are living under a rock. You are doing a PhD and you don't even know how to do a literature review. This is ridiculous. And my rebuttal took me about 5 minutes to just like, boom, email it off. And of course it came back with like, we will not be taking this any further. This is ridiculous.
Wow, that is crazy. Do you dietitians just have a common practice to like troll each other and complain about each other? Like
Funny.
how much time have you spent in your career complaining about what other people are doing?
Do you know, I'll tell you something, you laugh. When I was in my early days, that was me. So there's this kind of nutrition police kind of hat that we wear, what I used to wear. And I would see things, and it would be about personal trainers, and personal trainers would be talking about nutrition, and I'd be going, you shouldn't be talking about nutrition. It's not within your brief, and you said this, and it's not true. And we'd be the complaining group. And oh my goodness, I'm so glad I've broken out from that mold, because the reality is that dietitians are not the gatekeepers for nutrition. Everyone should be talking about nutrition. Unfortunately, we don't all agree on what the one source of truth is with nutrition. I think everyone agrees, and this is where the kind of safety thing is, everyone agrees that eating a diet that is based on whole, unprocessed, unpackaged food predominantly is a good thing, and anyone with half a brain cell can work out what that is, right? It's stuff that doesn't come in packets: meat, fish, chicken, eggs, milk, dairy. It does come in packets, but it's from a cow. Fruit, vegetables, nuts, seeds. It's easy to kind of navigate that. I think the dietitians have gotten a little better over the years. I went through the early stages of my sort of low carb transformation and wanting to work with the dietitians, and my mission is to transform the dietitians and blah blah blah. And actually, I've decided that I want to take the path of least resistance and actually do the work that is most productive. So I do my research and I do my practice, and the dietitians will come around, but it's not my sole job to make them see the light. They'll see the light like I did.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Going back to, as you were learning about low carbohydrate and taking the time, necessary to learn about it and make sure, you weren't misleading people with that information. I wonder if you can relate to this. I'm just curious. Like, I wish I could go back and talk to myself 10 years ago, because I know in 2014, Nina Teicholz wrote her book, The Big Fat Surprise. I listened to a radio interview that she gave where she explained some of her contents. I was super interested. I'd already been a personal trainer for a while. I thought fat was good at the time, and her concept sounded very interesting. But according to my Facebook history thing, I didn't actually crack the book open until 2016. And I want to go back and ask myself if there was some kind of like cognitive dissonance, or thinking like, okay, if this woman's right, and she might be, then everything I've been taught before this is wrong. Was there a bit of that with you as well, or not so much?
It certainly wasn't an ego thing. Like, yeah, it wasn't an ego thing. but it was more that it's almost like a cult or a religion or something. When you're in it and you believe in it so strongly that you can't possibly see that it could be wrong. So it's not about, oh goodness, what a waste, this could be wrong. Like, I don't care, the science changes and you move with it and you pivot and all that kind of stuff. But it was more, when I came through university, I did an undergraduate degree in physiology. I did a physiology degree. We never taught about insulin resistance. Can you believe that?
It's wild.
And then I did my dietetics, and our professors were, all well respected, and it was a different era to now. Our students of today, they sit there with their phones, with their computers, with their iPads, and they challenge everything you say. When I was back in university, I sound like a bit of a dinosaur, but we didn't have these devices where we could challenge them on the minute. Why, when somebody told me about the nutrition guidelines, what would be any reason that I would say, well, show me the evidence? What's the evidence? Why would you why would you mistrust, and you trust that the evidence is behind it? There was no need to ask about it or look into it. So I think when I sort of changed my philosophies 10 years ago, it wasn't the first time I came across it. There was the Atkins diet in the 80s. And I remember talking to my students about how dangerous this was, and how saturated fat gives you bad breath and ketosis, and it's bad for you, and it's, it's fatal, all these misconceptions, right? And I was one of those people who kind of dissed it. And then there comes a time where your knowledge base and probably your career maturity gets to a point where you go, there's something here that's not quite right. Let's take the time and explore it. So I didn't really care that, I did care that what I learned was wrong, but it was more like, it can't be wrong. It can't be wrong. And then you do the research to try and prove that it's not wrong, and you find that you can't prove it. So then it's like, well, this is a real predicament. What do I do now? I can actually leave my profession and go work in a cheese shop forever, or just take every day as it comes and decide what you're going to do. And that's essentially what happened.